Good morning, everyone. It was a little over a month ago that I had to make a really hard decision. And for me, it just brought me to my knees and broke my heart. I had to enter my mom into a convalescent home. That was probably the hardest thing next to deciding to being a priest. It's probably the hardest thing I've had to do. Well, eventually in the conversations with those who are caring for my mom, and I had asked the head nurse, I said, is there anything she needs? Because I've not been able to see her until this past Friday because of quarantine. And they said, she could use a pair of slippers. I said, okay, all right. As I just sent her there with the bare necessities, because I wasn't sure what a person needs, what they supply, I think you may understand. And so I decided to go to a shoe store up at the mall. Now, I could barely get through buying clothes for me. In fact, sometimes I just notice as the older I get, I have to go to the big boy section. You know what I mean? As one gets older. But I've never had to really buy clothes for a woman, especially shoes. Now, I thought Mom had about 400 pairs of shoes in the closet. I went through every one of them, but she didn't have any, just slippers. I can tell the difference between high heels and leather shoes, flat-soled shoes, but I didn't see any particular slipper. So I thought, okay. So I went to the store, and the store is a very large store. It's about my guess is it's almost as big as our space here in the church. So I started at one end and walked up and down and up and down the aisles. And I said, okay, I think I'm getting warmer here. I think I passed the high heels, I passed the flat shoes, I passed the sneakers, and then it went into the men's section. I didn't do this right. Let's try again. So I start over again. And I didn't realize that buying shoes is an art form. And so I want to give off by saying, I tip my hat to all you women. You know what you're doing. I had no idea. I finally found some, what I thought were slippers, and so I bought 2 pair just in case I was wrong, and that's what I gave to the nurse on Friday. I said, put these on my mom. If they don't fit, call me up. I'll pick them up. Choices are part of everyday life. Some choices are really easy. Some choices aren't. But especially if a choice is not easy, it really takes us that we have to prepare our hearts to really knuckle down and think about what we have to do, what kind of outcome we want as we try to make our decision on a choice. Today we hear of a meeting between our Lord Jesus and a man named Nicodemus. Kind of a neat name, Nicodemus. Well, Nicodemus was a very devout and holy Jewish man. I don't think anywhere I've ever read about him that he was ever seen as someone who was, cocky or nasty in any way. In fact, if anything, I think today's gospel and subsequent gospels to this were kind of a proof that he wants to go the extra mile to really understand and to hear the other person in order to make the best decision possible and to render a just judgment of what he thinks about the person or their ideas. What we see, first of all, is the gospel says that Nicodemus came to Jesus' door at nighttime. Now, where was Jesus staying? I'm not sure. But in any case, he knocks on the door at night. Now, for St. John's Gospel, it could be a couple different meanings. Literally nighttime, but even a figurative meaning is that in the timeline or the lifeline of Jesus, if anything, his birth being a time of great light, as he's approaching to go to Jerusalem to be killed, it was like darkness. And this is getting the darker kind of dark. No street lights, only a couple stars, and even then they're not burning bright on this night. Another way to think about it is that humanity had really kind of gone to the toilet. It says in the first reading today that it makes some mentions in Chronicles that, the people and the priests, everyone just kind of ditched what was doing right. And people had really become selfish. And that was written hundreds and hundreds of years before Jesus was born. So within this context of Jewish history, they were in a pretty dark time. So there's a knock on the door, and Nicodemus says to Jesus, "I'd like to speak with you." And they sit down and they have a conversation. Now maybe Nicodemus was there because he heard Jesus saying things or making some comments in his public speaking that maybe he was concerned about. Jesus, did you really mean this when you said that? So maybe he was there to wonder if he maybe had to gently chastise Jesus. That's one possibility. The second possibility could be is that maybe he heard Jesus speaking, and all of a sudden that faith in him, which was good and holy and honest, maybe was not as bright as he wanted it to be. So it's almost like he's going to Jesus for clarification or spiritual direction, whatever he might think about in today's words. But he wants to know what makes Jesus tick. And ultimately, the gospel today reveals is Jesus is presenting a way to understand God because he calls him, "He's my Father." In the Jewish tradition, those would have been fighting words, because that would be tantamount to making yourself, being a son or daughter of God, God's equal. And so, think of the commandments. You and I memorize them as little children. "I am the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods before me." Does this make Jesus like God Jr.? Well, Jesus is not a separate God. We know that. But the point of it is Nicodemus wants to understand Jesus because Jesus calls God Abba, my Father. And that really hit him right in the heart. Nicodemus was taken back in a good way. I can only imagine that even just the thought of God loving you and me so tenderly that no matter how many times we fall off the wagon and we sin in one way or the other, that he's not the God that will sit there and put his hands on hips and go, "You are an absolute waste. I don't know how many times I have to tell you, this is bad, it's sinful, don't do this." Is God doesn't chastise that way. God's always looking for an opportunity. The Father is always looking for an opportunity to truly be our Father. And he might call us on the carpet, but it's not without redemption. Some of the people in leadership at the time of Jesus would call people on the carpet and then say, "Get out. You're out. You're out of the group. You obviously don't believe. You're trash. Get out." Now, maybe I'm being harsh. I'm trying to get the point across. Is that God the Father's role is to continue to form us all of our lives. And thus, Jesus Christ, his Son, who takes that formation to an ever deeper level. Jesus says, "I have come not to judge. I have come not to condemn. I have come that they may have life and have it to the fullest." Now that's a type of a parent or a teacher or a leader that can capture my heart. Because I don't always get it right the first time. I may not get it right the 50th time. But when I know that someone has my back, that someone has compassion for me, it makes me change. It makes faith which may be dull become bright and brilliant, and it's contagious. I think all of us could agree, isn't it interesting to be around someone who has caught the faith authentically and it makes your faith all the stronger, versus someone who says, nah, I'm sorry, buddy, you didn't do it right, and I gave you a second chance, I even gave you a third chance, but you're out. And so, this week's gospel poses a very important question, I think, for any of us who want to be sincere in our faith. Do you choose to love God only because he has corrected you or called you to task? Or do you choose to love God because he's invited you into a lifelong relationship where the two of you can grow closer? We title this particular Sunday, the fourth Sunday of Lent, we call this Laetare Sunday, a sense of rejoicing. And I think there's anything to really be proud about. In addition to the mild weather and the good things that God has given us, the clothes on our back, the meals in our refrigerators, I think the thing that can make us so proud is that he wants to take every opportunity possible to let you and me know there's always a second chance. Hang on, I've got your back.